Welcome to the Infrastructure Podcast. My name is Anthony Oliver, and today we're going to find out a little bit more about sub-national transport bodies. What are they, what do they do, and why do we need them? Well, for those of you not in the know, they were created by the Cities and Local Government Devolution Act in 2016, and there are now 7 sub-national transport bodies covering different regions of the UK. The intention is to provide strategic transport policy leadership at a larger scale than perhaps is possible by the existing local authorities individually. Of the 7 currently in existence, only one, Transport for the North, has been given statutory powers to ensure that the North's pan-northern strategic transport priorities are developed and delivered. The rest operate in shadow form, advising and cajoling, but without formal powers to actually act. That said, they do hold influence, and by bringing together local authorities, businesses, communities and asset owners, they should be able to make significant cross-border difference in terms of where vast sums of devolved and centralised public cash are focused. But the question, I suppose, is do they really do that in reality? Well, to discuss this, it's my pleasure to welcome Martin Tugwell to the Infrastructure Podcast today. Martin is Chief Executive of Transport for the North, a former leader of England's economic heartland, and a past president of the Chartered Institution of Highways and Transportation. So he probably knows more about STBs than most. Martin, welcome to the Infrastructure Podcast.
Many thanks, Anthony. It's delighted to be able to join you today.
Great. Well, Martin, I tried to describe what a sub-national transport body is and does. Did I get it right? I don't know, maybe. Give me your description. What are they for?
Well, I've been working at a regional level now for the best part of 25 years, and I think we're on my 3rd incarnation of working at a regional level. When I'm trying to explain why we exist, it comes down to me for 3 things. First of all, there are projects which people are going to collaborate on, the big pan-regional things that cross boundaries. In the north, it's things like the A66, but it could be coast-to-coast connections. Then there are projects or issues which we're all facing, where doing it once rather than 21 times leads to efficiencies and effectiveness. And thirdly is about having a stronger voice for the region. And I mean, if I think about what the power there is, if I think about the first strategic transport plan that TfN published, the Northern Powerhouse Rail proposition was front and centre of that plan. And I'd like to think that because of the voice that the North has through TfN, it was very instrumental in then getting that taken on board and becoming part of a government investment programme.
Okay. I mean, I suppose since STBs were invented, we've got the Department for Levelling Up and we've got the Levelling Up funds. I mean, how has this moved, I suppose, the goalposts in terms of regional devolution?
Well, I think it's important to just remember that TfN and the legislation that set it up was, if you like, a first incarnation of devolution. It was set up explicitly by the government to provide devolution to the north, to allow the northern leaders, business and political, to come together to realise the potential of the north. I know we call it levelling up now, but it's a devolution agenda that's been going since that act was passed. The fundamental point for me about what STBs and what the devolution agenda is all about is realising there's a need for change, and the way in which we plan, develop and then implement investment needs to change if we're going to realise that potential and actually deliver on some strategic outcomes.
Well, we'll get into a bit more a bit later on, I'm sure, whether that potential is actually being delivered. I mean, the Transport for the North is the only one, as I said, with statutory powers. I mean, what does that enable you to do that perhaps the others can't?
Well, it gives us a voice. It gives us a really strong voice. As a statutory body, we've got 5 general functions, not just about preparing the transport strategy, but also about giving advice about how functions are carried out. It gives us the opportunity to actually make recommendations about how things can be improved in terms of the efficiency and the effectiveness of the way things are delivered. And it's certainly something that we'll come back to probably with the Strategic Transport Plan revision later this year. The other thing I just perhaps worth exploring or just mentioning at this point is, of course, in addition to being a statutory subnational transport body, we have a form of rail devolution already in the north. So separate from that statutory role, we've got a joint responsibility with the department through the Rail North Agreement, where we're working with the department to oversee delivery of both the Northern and TPE contracts. Now, whilst the financial responsibility rests with department rightly, what that relationship does mean is that when it comes to business planning, when it comes to understanding and targeting the funds that are available, we've got a much more direct relationship with the delivery of those contracts than perhaps we would have had otherwise. So it's both those functions which give us a really strong voice in terms of making a difference for the North.
Okay, good, because I suppose in reality your powers are still quite limited in terms of raising money and funding projects. I mean, the phrase is no powers have been taken away from local government, but they do have to fit in with your plans. There's a kind of a give and take there. The question I suppose on everyone's lips is who's actually in charge?
Well, I see TfN's role as being an agent of change. We've got the ability to take a longer term look, to bring the accumulated knowledge that we've got within what's a relatively small but very capable team at TfN, and use that as an agent of change for delivery by city regions and local authorities at the local level. I think for me, there's kind of, I keep coming back. We know certain things to be true. We know there's inertia in the system. We know we've got multiple funding streams with complicated administration, all costing time and money to deliver. We know there's a lack of clarity around funding. And we know that increasingly it's not just about what you do in transport, but what you do in things like energy and digital. What you've got with STBs, what you've got with TfN, is that evidence-based, vision-led approach to delivering change within the system. We don't deliver ourselves, but we enable things to happen differently at a local level.
And that means bringing in the private sector, and the private sector's got a huge role in helping you to deliver those visions. Absolutely,
and that's why you're right. Actually, I go back one step and say it's vital for the private sector to be shaping the vision, and that's why the private sector are members of our board. That's why the voice of business is integral to the work of the board. But we need to harness the knowledge and skills within the private sector to realise that vision, and I think we're still sometimes guilty of assuming that the only mechanism or the only way of delivering investment is by the public sector. It's not. We need to work with that private sector.
Of course, one of the private sector organisations that you do work very closely with is TransPennine Express, which TfN co-manages with government. What power of influence do STBs like Transport for the North really have to insist on performance from their private sector partners?
Well, if anybody has been watching the work of our Rail North Committee and indeed the main board, they'll see that we're very much holding TPE to account, working with the department in that regard, insisting on having a recovery plan, monitoring and reporting against that plan, and really shining a light about what needs to happen. I think the thing, though, for me is we kind of also need to understand, moving forward, we've got to get a better balance. I know a number of commentators will looked at some of the successes of open access operators on the East Coast Main Line, amongst others. But if you look at how the contracts for some of the main services are managed, I think by common consent, very overly managed from the centre. And you kind of think, well, if actually some of these private operators delivering services had the flexibility that an open access operator have, I think we would be able to see a lot more success in growing the market, which is what we need to do in the North.
Okay, a little bit more perhaps about what's going on in Transport for the North in a moment. Let's talk about what's happening next month, which is this conference, the STB conference, to bring together all 7 STBs. It's in Birmingham, 5th of June. I suppose if you want to know a bit more about STBs, that's the place to go. The website says it's to leverage the collective role in prioritising regionally joined up transport investment and enabling local implementation. How does that manifest itself in reality? What's the conference all about?
Well, this year's conference is really about building on the momentum we gained last year. It's a chance for us to showcase the work we're doing, how it can be deployed more widely, and what the priorities are. So, it's showcasing work we've done around EV charging infrastructure, transport-related social exclusion, decarbonisation, alternative fuels, rural transport. So it's about what is it that practically we are doing to help set that agenda and move it forward. And of course, we'll be joined by our national partners, both National Highways and Network Rail, GBR, but also recognising that some of the biggest pieces of strategic infrastructure, our ports, our airports, are in the private sector. So we'll have voices from there talking about the role of the global gateways and the importance of transport connecting them to and from their markets.
Yeah, well, it's interesting you say that, because I get why the STBs might want to come together to exchange ideas, but I suppose why should the supply chain partners be there as well?
It comes back to this theme I've touched on a couple of times already. It's about we know we need change. If I look at the work we've done as TfN on regional decarbonisation, yes, we can plot a way of getting to nearly net zero by 2045. But boy, we burn through our carbon budget in 10 years. 10 years. And most of the investment for the next 5 years is already committed. So we've got a supreme effort in terms of changing the way we go about things. STBs, with their evidence-based, vision-led approach, is very much at the forefront of that. And working with the supply chain, working with our delivery partners is absolutely fundamental, because if we've got that sense of where are we trying to get to, people can rally behind the common objective, if you like, and we can actually realise that change more quickly.
Okay, and it's free, so imagine if you're interested in this, then just get down there 5th of June in the Birmingham NEC. Let's talk a bit more about transport for the North. Your vision is for a thriving north of England where world-class transport supports sustainable economic growth. How will you deliver this and the other, I suppose, £92 billion of increased GVA that you set out in the draft transport plan?
Well, the first thing is that we're about to start consultation on the revised strategic transport plan, a 12-week consultation starting in May. It benefits, I like to think of it as almost like the next generation of strategic transport plans, because it benefits from a very substantial amount of technical research around the economy, the environment and communities. It sets out very clear headline outcomes around growing the economy by over 100 billion, reduction in social exclusion, achieving nearly net zero. More importantly for me, it sets out our approach to monitoring and reporting, not unlike the National Infrastructure Commission, and using a set of right share metrics to do that. Now, together, that gives us a really clear foundation, a much clearer foundation on which to advise government about what needs to happen in terms of where the funding that is available directed to achieve those outcomes, and report on progress, because we're not very good sometimes at actually saying, well, how are we doing? What needs to be changed? And recognising sometimes there are what they call black swan events, things that come from left field, change the nature of travel, and having a plan which can reflect that, take that into account, and then adjust the advice to government, I think is going to give that long-term certainty and clarity for investors and communities of the North.
But it's fair to say that the most bits of work that you've done, that anyone's done really, do demonstrate there's a huge amount of value that can be leveraged. Yet we do also see that there are a lot of blockers. I mean, you also say both Northern Powerhouse Rail and HS2 are integral to the North's future rail network. Yet we're seeing those slow down in terms of delivery. I mean, where are you, for instance, with the £39 billion Northern Powerhouse Rail? Is it dead in the water?
Well, very much not. I think let's just take one step back. I'll make the point again. I don't think, unless we had TfN and the Strategic Transport Plan, we would have got a national government to commit the sum of money that it's committed through the Integrated Rail Plan, a long-term commitment to delivery. And in fact, we've got things like the Transpennine route upgrade in delivery now, £9 billion worth of investment underway on delivery. Now, what you're right in saying is that our work around the economy is showing there's an even bigger prize to be gained. And that's why the Northern Powerhouse Rail network, in full as we call it, remains fundamental to achieving the full transformation of the North. But it's not just about that. So I think one of the things we've got to get better at is making sure that when we've got these commitments from government, we work with them to deliver them quickly, efficiently, because there's nothing quite as successful or as good in being able to say to the Treasury, look, you said you've given us this amount of money. We said we would deliver it. Hey, guess what? When it comes to rail, you tend to get even bigger benefits than you think you would. So here's a success. Now, the next stage in achieving that full transformation of the North is this project. And I think that's a much stronger, a much more mature way of having a conversation with government, because we're talking about a 20, 30-year timeline here. And we need to keep moving and building momentum. And that's what we're about. At a practical level, we're continuing to work as co-sponsor with the department on the business case for Northern Powerhouse Rail. The team I've got, the analysts, are doing the technical work that underpins the strategic outline business case, and we'll look forward to being able to comment and on that document when it comes out later this year.
But there is I hear what you say, but there must also be a certain sense of frustration in the delays that are being introduced to that project. Clear disappointment also with the government's recent announcement to delay the northern section of HS2. I mean, what can you realistically do to influence this outcome when the Chancellor is saying, we need to slow down because the UK's economic situation is worse than it was expected?
Well, I mean, what's encouraging is when these announcements were made, there are lots of commentators, not Transport for the North alone, lots of commentators saying, do you know what? When you delay investment, you end up costing more. You see the benefits coming later, so you actually kind of lose a lot of things. Now, our job is to kind of map out the benefits. We set out in the independent economic review that's going to be published later this year about, actually putting some numbers around. If you make the investment, if you just invest in the North to the same level that you invest in London and the South, which is only an extra £21 billion a year, then the benefit to the UK economy, the benefit to the North, is so much greater than you would understand. We're talking about benefits of sort of 2 or 3 times the cost going in. Now, our job is to keep making that argument. It's governments to then consider how to spend the funding available. But it also comes back, Anthony, to the point we touched on earlier. It's also recognising that some of this is not just assuming the only answer is the public sector. I'd much rather we're having a conversation with the private sector that says, here's where we need to get to. These are the things we need to achieve. This is the contribution from the public sector. Now let's have a conversation with the private sector about how we can double up, or we can use that money, that commitment from the government, to unlock further investment from the private sector. Because do you know what? We keep hearing about how the big companies have got money to invest in infrastructure. Let's have that conversation.
Martin, it's a huge number of moving parts that you're managing there. Let's talk a bit more about you for a moment. I mean, you've been CEO at TfM for approaching 2 years. Before that, you were Programme Director at England's economic heartland in the region between Oxford and Cambridge. I mean, what drew you to this role at TfM? It's complicated, it's incredibly political, and it's certainly not an easy role.
And that's exactly why I'm there. It's for me, I mean, I've worked in, as I said, regional planning, transport for 25 years or so. For me, I see Transport for the North as being, if you like, the pinnacle of my career. It's a huge opportunity, immense potential. And in TfN, I've worked with many of my colleagues previously through the network of STBs and I know it's a truly fantastic team that we've got, and it's an absolute privilege being able to lead them.
What's the most interesting bits of work on your desk right now, today, as we speak then?
Well, right now I'm really excited by the strategic transport plan and the revised one, because for me, it's the first time we've brought together really serious evidence about the economy, the environment. And for me, what is increasingly, I think, one of my great concerns, the issue of equity. I know we've still got a long way to go in terms of cracking the environmental impact of transport, decarbonisation, etc. But we're making progress there. But when I look at the report we published last year, which said that right here, right now, some 20% of the North's population, over 3.5 million people, are living in areas at high risk of being excluded from society because either they've got no transport, they can't afford it, or the options are just too limited. That is here and now. And so making sure as professionals we're listening to all needs of society from different backgrounds, different perspectives. That for me is one of the biggest challenges as us moving forward, because otherwise we'll get in. I'm worried that we'll have this divergence. If you can afford to invest in environmental transport like electric vehicles, you can make it. But surely we're about reducing the inequalities within our society, and transport is fundamental to that. So that, I think, is a really important part of what we're doing at the moment. It's why the work we've done on transport-related social exclusion is going to be one of the things we feature at the conference in June.
Okay. You've built a career in local government, starting as principal engineer in Devon, and then in the South East, and then in Oxford. I mean, this is your first job in the North. How's that been for you?
It's a wonderful experience. I mean, what a rich history. We're just coming up to, we're not far off now. It's a couple of years until we'll see the 200th anniversary of the first railway in this country between Stockton and Darlington. So this is an area which has shaped the transport revolution time and again. So being able to be part of that legacy and, if you like, build upon it, I think is amazing. And it's an amazing area of the country, stunningly beautiful, immensely vibrant cities, and an area where, just being part of it is a real privilege.
Sounds like you'll be taking the plunge and actually moving lock, stock and barrel to Manchester, Liverpool soon.
Well, if only it was that simple, Anthony. One of the things that this role has really opened my eyes to is just how, and there's no other way to put it, just how biased the system is towards the view that comes out of London and the South East. I've stood on the platform at Leeds Station on many occasions, a full platform, waiting to see a Trans-Pennine Express come in, which is already full and standing. And by the way, we only get 2 of those trains an hour, and they've only got 6 coaches. So when I hear the narrative being, repeated time and again about how, the rail recovery hasn't been so strong, I can only think it's people whose experience of the rail network is their daily commute into Victoria or Waterloo. And frankly, compare and contrast routes which have got 4 trains an hour, 12 coaches an hour in those trains with our services, a lot of which are, as I said, either hourly or half hourly only and much shorter. It's that perspective which is really important. And it's one of the reasons why, unfortunately, I have to spend so much time in London, is actually because if you're not visible in Westminster and around Whitehall, then actually that message doesn't get through.
Well, which brings me on to a few points just to close around, the transport for the future. It's increasingly about breaking down silos to deliver economic, environmental, social benefits. As anyone that was at the recent Interchange event, also understands it's about embracing digital technology and the energy transition. How do you actually make sure people are thinking about rail, but also roads and buses and cars and bicycles, active travel, etc., energy, and pulling everyone together to really drive forward those economic benefits?
Well, there's a couple of things in there for me, Anthony. One is I increasingly kind of starting to come to the view that when we're talking as a profession about the silos within our profession, I think we are actually guilty of making that worse than it should be. We need to make sure we have knowledge and experience about these different modes. But I do think sometimes we are as guilty as anybody else about creating those silos. That's why when you come to regional bodies, when you come to things like Transport for the North, and increasingly I think of us more as an embryonic subnational infrastructure body rather than a subnational transport body, because the work we've done on EVs and looking at the charging infrastructure, we naturally reached out to National Grid, the DNOs, the Energy Savings Trust, as well as the transport authorities. We had that picture which says if you're going to do EVs, you need to understand what's happening with the energy systems. If you want to do stuff around improving the availability of app-enabled features, you've got to have ubiquitous digital connectivity. As soon as you start, as we are, thinking about outcomes that are place-based and user-centre, you know what? You break down those silos without any problem at all. And you start empowering the designers and the consultants to start thinking, okay, here's what we need to do. Now, how do we go about it? That's the way forward, rather than yet more studies or yet more specialist sort of approaches. We've got to break these down ourselves. It's in our gift.
And I imagine that going back to the STB conference on the 5th of June, that is going to be a key theme, is it? You know, trying to bring people together and talking and thinking about these issues in a different way.
I think if I kind of had to summarize it in 3 words, I think it's about movement, it's about understanding, and a commitment. So a movement in terms of sharing what we've done and demonstrating how it can be applied. So movement in terms of doing things differently, understanding about the scale of the challenge, but also the need for pace. The fact we've seen in the pandemic, change is possible. It's not only possible, it can be achieved relatively quickly. And commitment, I think there is a need for us individually, collectively, to stand up and to step up to be making a difference, because we pride ourselves in knowing the challenges of the environment. We pride ourselves in knowing the opportunities around things and the need to do things differently. We've got to stand up and be accountable, and if necessarily, use the evidence, use the technical skills we've got to set out not only why change is needed, but more importantly for decision makers, and this is what we do through the Strategic Transport Plan, set out a way forward that they can then consider in the round, and which we can then get around and deliver to.
Martin, best of luck with that. It's the amount of passion and energy that you're going to deliver to that. I'm sure that you cannot possibly do anything but succeed. So many thanks for joining me today. Best of luck on the 5th of June, and thanks for joining me today on the Infrastructure Podcast.
Thank you very much, Anthony, and I look forward to seeing as many people as possible on the 5th of June in Birmingham.
Great. Well, it's free. Just go to the website, Google it, and it will take you there. So thanks very much, Martin. That's all we've got time for today. But we will have more from the Infrastructure Podcast in the pipeline, and more guests to talk to as we continue to probe the big issues faced across the sector. If you haven't done so already, do check out the new Infrastructure Podcast website. That's www.infrastructure-podcast.com, where you will find background information and all the latest podcasts to listen to and to share. So thanks for joining us today. Thanks again to Martin. I look forward to seeing you all again very soon.